She forgave him once. She believed the tears, the promises, the late-night apologies. But Melissa didn't know that some men don't stop because they're sorry. They stop when they're caught again. This is her story. Melissa from San Diego, she forgave him once, but he never stopped. Series, 10 True Affair Stories from California. The first time I forgave him, I thought I was healing us. I was just postponing the truth. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I had just finished a late procedure at the clinic and came home to find David sitting on the couch, his face pale, his hands clenched, like a student about to confess cheating on an exam. But it wasn't school, and I wasn't his teacher. I was his wife. He said her name was Claire. She was a summer intern. 24. Ambitious. Blonde. She had a laugh that filled rooms, he said. As if that explained anything. He said it was a mistake. That it was brief. That it ended before it started. That he couldn't live with himself. That he had to tell me. I didn't cry. Not right away. I sat down in the chair across from him and asked if he was in love with her. He said no. Quickly. Desperately. Like he had rehearsed the answer in the mirror. Then why? I asked. He didn't answer that part. He just lowered his head and started to cry. That's what I remember most. Not her name. Not the details. But the sound of him crying like a boy, shoulders shaking, fingers pressed against his eyes as if he could push the guilt back in. We didn't sleep that night. He sat on the edge of the bed. I laid beside him, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through every moment of the last 6 months. The canceled dinner. The sudden business trip. The way he smiled when he looked at his phone and said, "Just a client." He said it only happened once. That it was after a late night at the office. That they were both drunk. That he hated himself for it. And somewhere, in the quiet between his sobs and my silence, I whispered, "Then let's try to fix this." Because I thought that was strength. We went to therapy. Twice a week. I told no one. Not even my sister. I couldn't bear the idea of people looking at us differently, even if I already was. I watched David apologize in front of a stranger with credentials on the wall and tissues in a wooden box. I watched him nod when asked about his childhood, his insecurities, his fear of aging. The therapist said something about intimacy avoidance. About unresolved needs. About rebuilding trust. I nodded too. We created a reconnection plan. Dinner every Wednesday. No phones. Eye contact. Honesty. I tried. I really did. He brought flowers one night. Took me to a jazz show another. We danced in the living room once, wine in hand, laughing like people who hadn't almost shattered. And for a while, it felt like maybe, just maybe, we were okay. But there were moments. Tiny cracks. A hesitation when I asked where he was. A smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. An unfamiliar perfume on a shirt he swore he hadn't worn. They weren't confirmations. They were shadows. And I ignored them, because I wanted to believe that people change. That love was enough. And more than anything, I wanted to believe in myself as a woman who could forgive, who could rebuild. But forgiveness isn't a plaster you slap on betrayal. It's a seed you plant, and some soil just won't take. Some nights, I would wake up and look at him sleeping, and wonder who he was dreaming about. I hated myself for thinking it. Then hated him for making me feel that way. But I stayed. Because we had built a life. Because we had friends who said we were perfect together. Because I had already spent 2 decades building a home, a clinic, a rhythm. And I wasn't ready to tear it down over one night. One girl. One mistake. That's what I told myself. One night. One mistake. But something in me shifted. A quiet shift. Like furniture moved an inch in the night. Not loud. But permanent. I began watching more closely. Listening for things I used to ignore. Saving receipts I once threw away. Not because I expected to find anything. But because I didn't trust him anymore. And I didn't know if I ever really had. Still, I smiled. Still, I played the part. Because I wanted it to be true. Because I thought I was healing us. But I was just postponing the truth. He swore it was the last time. I didn't realize he meant the last time he got caught. 6 months had passed. 6 long months of Wednesday dinners, mutual playlists, the therapist's voice echoing in our heads, and the faint hope that we were rebuilding something real. David had become attentive again, if not a little forced. We both acted like forgiveness had cleaned the slate. But then the signs came back. He started working late. Again. Not the kind of late where he'd call to say he was stuck, just late, silent, and half present when he returned. He started placing his phone face down on the counter. Notifications were silenced. I'd ask simple questions, and his answers had the fuzziness of someone thinking too hard. There was a faint scent on one of his suit jackets, floral, sweet, not mine. When I asked, he said it was the dry cleaners. I wanted to believe him. I did. But belief is different after betrayal. It's cautious. Suspicious. Tired. Then, one evening, I got an email. No subject. No signature. Just a photo attached. It was a grainy image taken through tinted glass. David and a woman in a tight embrace outside a restaurant. The woman wasn't Claire. This time, it was someone else. I recognized her face. Melissa, the marketing coordinator from his firm. She had spoken to me once at a company gala. Warm, sharp, younger. I remembered her eyes. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't confront him. I closed the email and saved the image to a secure folder. Because this time, I needed to be sure. I started documenting everything. I checked bank statements, call logs, hotel receipts. Nothing obvious, but small things: a double dinner charge at a place I'd never been with him, an Uber trip that ended at a hotel address, a sudden gift purchase from a boutique that didn't match any birthdays I knew. When he got home, I smiled. I asked about his day. He talked about meetings and stress and how exhausted he felt. I kissed his cheek and told him I was proud of how hard he was working. And then I made a note of the time he arrived. Each night became a quiet act of collection. Not revenge. Not even anger. Just clarity. Quiet, precise clarity. The David who stood in our kitchen, sipping wine and talking about potential vacations, was no longer the man I had married. Or maybe he was and I just hadn't seen it until now. I began to think about how many versions of me he thought he could keep in play. The forgiving wife. The professional woman. The steady anchor. I wasn't angry. I was disillusioned. That's worse. Anger can burn clean. Disillusionment settles like ash. One night, I stayed late at the clinic. Not because I had work, but because I didn't want to see him walk in and lie to my face again. When I got home, he was asleep on the couch. His phone on the armrest, unlocked. I didn't hesitate. I opened his messages. Nothing overt. But I found a chat under the name Mike L. Except Mike used too many exclamation marks. Mike sent hearts. Mike wasn't Mike. I took screenshots. I made backups. Then I backed away from the couch, and from the version of myself who once thought rebuilding trust meant closing your eyes tighter. He swore it was the last time. He cried in therapy. He promised me it would never happen again. But what he meant was that it would never happen again where I could see it. Until I did. And this time, I wasn't the woman who needed him to admit it. I already knew. I just hadn't decided what to do with that truth. Yet. He thought I'd break down again. Instead, I stood up this time, for myself. By now, I knew how he operated. The inconsistencies, the charming deflections, the perfect lies delivered with the casual confidence of a man who thought he knew his audience. But he had underestimated one thing: I wasn't the same woman who had forgiven him the first time. That version of me no longer lived in our house. She had been replaced by someone sharper, quieter, and far more dangerous. I didn't cry when I found the second phone hidden beneath the spare tire in his trunk. I didn't flinch when I heard the voicemail Melissa left him, her voice syrupy and smug. I simply saved everything: the audio, the texts, the timestamps. I pulled the footage from our home security camera, yes, the one he thought I never activated. It showed him sneaking out late, a pattern as familiar as a bedtime routine. I printed bank statements, highlighted hotel names. Called the friend who had once warned me about him and recorded her story. Every file had its place in the folder I kept locked in my office drawer, labeled not with his name, but with mine. Because this wasn't about him anymore. I planned the confrontation with the same precision I used to run my clinic. Not rage, not drama. Just timing. It was his mother's birthday. A family dinner at our house. His siblings, parents, nieces. Everyone who thought we were the golden couple. I wore a deep green dress, conservative but powerful, and greeted them all with my practiced smile. David stood beside me, his hand on my back like a claim. He had no idea I was hours away from burning that entire claim to the ground. After dessert, I raised my glass. I have something I'd like to share. He looked at me, confused, maybe slightly nervous. He knew I didn't like public speaking unless necessary. He squeezed my hand. David and I have been going through some challenges, I began, keeping my tone even. And I think it's time our family knew the truth. He froze. The room tensed. I laid the folder on the table. This contains messages, photos, and financial records, documenting his ongoing affair with a woman he works with. Melissa gasps. A fork dropped. David stood up. What are you doing? I didn't raise my voice. Presenting the facts. No accusations. Just evidence. We can talk about this later. Not here. No. We've talked enough behind closed doors. Now everyone gets to see the full picture. His mother whispered his name. His brother leaned forward, looking at the papers. David tried to deny it, at first. Then when the images were passed around, the air left his lungs. It's not what it looks like, he said. It never is, I replied. Until it is. He looked at me, eyes glassy. You don't understand. It's not serious. It didn't mean anything. You're right, I said. It didn't mean anything to you. But it meant something to me. Because I was married to you. Because I trusted you. Because I stayed. For the first time, I watched him crumble. Not with rage or arrogance, but with the dawning realization that this time, the script had changed. He expected tears. He expected begging. Instead, he got silence. Not the kind of silence that waits. The kind that finishes. He followed me to the kitchen later, while the others lingered awkwardly in the living room. Please, we can fix this, he whispered. I looked at him, really looked. A man who once knew how to make me laugh, make me feel seen. And now, a stranger who mistook my composure for weakness. No, I said. You can fix yourself. But I'm not staying broken while you do. I walked upstairs. Took off the green dress. Folded it neatly. Packed a bag I had already placed in the back of my closet days ago. He didn't try to stop me. Maybe because part of him knew this time, he'd crossed a line he couldn't charm his way back over. This wasn't revenge. This was release. The last time I was underestimated, it was by a man who thought the strongest woman in the room was the one who stayed. He was wrong. It's the one who stands up and walks away. I didn't just leave the marriage. I left the version of me who kept accepting less. The morning after the confrontation, I didn't cry. I didn't scream into a pillow or throw things around the house. I woke up, made coffee, fed the cat, and folded the last of my clothes into a suitcase I had packed in stages over weeks. The house was quiet. David had left early, or maybe he hadn't come back in at all. I didn't check. I locked the front door behind me and walked out with nothing but 2 bags, a laptop, and the weightless kind of silence you only feel when you've finally chosen yourself. La Jolla was warmer than I remembered. I'd found a small apartment near the ocean. Nothing fancy: white walls, creaky floorboards, the soft hum of waves if you left the balcony door cracked just an inch. It was the kind of place where you could hear your own thoughts, finally. I sat at the desk by the window and opened a blank document. Not to vent. Not to blame. Not even to relieve. But to write. Because somewhere in the 6 years of therapy, betrayal, silence, and pretending, I'd stopped hearing my own voice. And I needed to find it again. The blog wasn't meant to be public at first. It was private, password protected, titled, Letters to the Woman Who Stayed. Each entry was part confession, part chronicle, part quiet rebellion. I wrote about what forgiveness costs. About how hope can feel like a trap when it's held too tightly. About what it means to look in the mirror and not recognize the woman who keeps saying I'm fine. And to my surprise, it didn't stay private for long. A friend read it. She asked to share it with someone else. Then someone emailed me, a woman from Atlanta, who said, I thought I was the only one. Within a month, the blog had hundreds of subscribers. Anonymous names. Real pain. Real strength. Not one of them asked, what did he do? They all asked, how did you leave? David texted, of course. The first was the usual, we can fix this. Then came, I've changed. I swear. Then, just talk to me. Please. He sent old photos. A video of us dancing in the living room. He wrote, you were my home. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry. But because I didn't live in that house anymore. Not the physical one. Not the emotional one either. I had stopped accepting less. And the space that left behind had to be protected. One evening, I recorded a video. Just my face. No edits. No music. Just a still frame and my voice. This isn't a story about him. It's a story about me. About the woman who stayed too long. And the woman who finally stopped asking if she was enough. Because she always was. He just wasn't the one who could see it. The video was titled, Reclaimed. I posted it. Then I closed the laptop. I went outside. Walked barefoot to the beach. Let the ocean touch my toes. And I stood there for a while. Not waiting. Not remembering. Just breathing. I didn't just leave the marriage. I left the version of me who thought love meant endurance. Now, I write. Not about him. About her. The woman who walked away with nothing but truth in her hands and still called it freedom. Melissa walked away, not from a man, but from the silence she used to live in. But not every woman leaves quietly. In our next story, a wife in Sacramento doesn't walk away at all. She stays, long enough to uncover a betrayal that runs deeper than an affair. Don't miss story number 3 in our series, 10 True Affair Stories from California. Because sometimes, the most dangerous lies are the ones whispered by those who claim to protect you.